Well, good evening and welcome to the Caithness Amateur Dram Antiques Society tasting. And tonight I'm going to do a tasting of the 2024 Springbank and Glengyle Distillery releases. So what happens is I'm a member of the Springbank Society and I was able to get a purchase of six samples of the 2024 Springbank and Glengyle distillery releases. uh, the Springbank Society has a membership of 5,000 and it costs £50 to join. At the moment, membership is closed uh, because of oversubscription. But what it gets you for £50 life membership, you get a t-shirt or a polo shirt, a membership card, and access to special Springbank Society releases, usually by ballot, and also by ballot to some Springbank releases like the 30-year-old and other bottlings. So this lineup comes with six little sample bottles, each 2cl. We're going to start up with the Springbank 13-year-old local barley at 54.1%. This is all the 2024 releases, although uh, this year's release was crafted using Belgravia barley from Glen Craig's farm, distilled in June 2010. It underwent maturation in a mix of ex-sherry, 40%, and ex-bourbon, 60% cask, before being bottled in December 2023 at the age of 13 years. A total of 8,400 bottles were made available. So, looking at this one, it's got lovely tears in it, and it's quite a pale colour, probably belying the 60% ex-bourbon cask. Nice tears on this one. And straight away, it's full of fruitiness. Ripened bananas, boiled sweets, and cinnamon. And there's a real creaminess, silky vanilla, custard, with a sprinkling of sea salt alongside sponge fingers, freshly grated lemon zest, pear skin, and a faint smoke reminiscent of a gently smouldering beachside bonfire. Springbank's peated to about 15 parts per million. Although, of course, we know that when it's in the cask, it does lose some of that, and it'll lose some by the time it's bottled. And usually, by the time it's bottled, it's down to maybe you'll be talking 4 or 5 parts per million in the bottle. But going back into this, and you get some baked apple with a slightly underdone crumble topping. You do get the Dunnage Warehouse mustiness, and it's some almond marzipan in the background. The alcohol feels well integrated. This is 54.1% ABV. And you only get a mellow pepperiness appearing. It's very bourbon forward. I'm not getting much of the sherry influence at all, especially when you think it's 40% cask makeup. It's the vibrant fruits that stand out. Tin pineapple, nectarines, and mangoes. You do get the steep barley, salty licorice, and a citrusy gelato, slivers of bung cloth too, and you get that dunnage floor and a whiff of ozone. The smoke is almost non-existent, but if you didn't have it there, you wouldn't get that added layer of complexity. We'll try this on the mouth. And initially you get the thick, chewy and oily texture. And from there you get a pepperiness and a malty note. Then you get the strawberries, the brandy schnapps, and the Parma violets. It's a zingy lemon sherbet, which moves into a light menthol mintiness, mint dusted in castor sugar, a slightly stale Victoria sponge cake, and a gentle spritz like appetizer. There's a creamy, oily mouthfeel that coats the tongue and the cheeks, and you get some dark chocolate and light coffee coming through as the palate develops. And as it develops further, you get some pink Himalayan salt crystals and nutmeg. There's a proper oiliness and a decent waxiness. Hints of charred lemons, wet pebbles, petrichor, and a sprinkle of salt, accompanied by wood smoke, slight peat, some coffee grounds, and earthy licorice root. But also you get that sliver of chocolate and subtle yellow fruits. And it's a long finish. You get lingering smoke, peach, and lots of minerality, and a sliver of mint again. And the finish lingers on for quite a while. You get some orange pith and pineapple and fizzy cola bottles, and a little black currant in the latter palate. The alcohol feels a bit hotter here, although it still maintains a reasonable balance with the cask and the spirit. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. And you do get some Scotch mist there as well. And the water brings out a lot of dust, the old wardrobes, the carpenter's workshop. And you get the old oak barrels and a little engine oil too. So it's drier on the nose. And some of those sweeter, sugary aromas from before have faded a bit into the background. More citrus now, like a sour mix. And the smoke, the little smoke that was there is mellowed somewhat too, and it leaves it a little drier oak in its place. It still has a creamy mouthfeel, but slightly less intense, but it's still there. You get whipped cream, custard, and sugar coated donuts. And that moves into a sort of warm oak spice and a bit of salted caramel on the latter palate. Like the reduced nose, most of the smoke is faded, along with some of that spice from the alcohol. It's still very bourbon cask driven, with not much sherry influence appearing for me. And on the finish, there's subtle peat smoke hiding in the background. There's that wine gum sweetness, toasted oats, dunnage earthiness, and a slight drying taste. This is a really good Springbank with a fruity mineral edge, citrus notes, waxy salinity, all add to the experience. It didn't exactly blow me away, but that's fine and probably not fair to expect anyway. Springbank has such a singular profile that it stands out regardless. Those who manage to secure a bottle and plan on opening it should consider themselves lucky. I'm a bit surprised at the lack of sherry aromas and flavours in this local barley release. However, I'm thoroughly enjoying the more bourbon forward experience that I'm getting. It's quite delicious, good mouthfeel, good finish, and enough going on to keep me interested in going back for another sip. It's a touch hot on the palate, but I'm nitpicking. It can take a drop or two of water, but I don't think it needs it. So we'll cleanse our palates. So next we're going on to the Springbank 12-year-old cask strength, bottled at 57.2%. And again, this is the 2024 release. You get these little bottles of 2cl measures. I actually got 2 packs of this, so I can go back and try some more. This year's release of Springbank 12-year-old cask strength was matured in a mixture of bourbon casks at 70% and sherry casks at 30%. I don't have any details about the how many bottles were released. So I've had a few cask strength, 12-year-old cask strength Springbacks. Usually they add maybe 3 or 4 different casks. This one's bourbon and sherry only, and it's got nice tiers on it. And again, it kicks off with notes of marzipan, smoked meats, and a smokiness like burnt matches. It's full, deep, and funky. It's got a fine smoke, vanilla, apple compote with a dash of lemon. It's like being in a horse stable. Mint, mineral salty notes, caramel, light raisins, white pepper, candied orange peel, and then you get that sort of cardboard diesel malt. But then again, you get canned mango and delicate oak. It's a powerful nose, not in an overwhelming or overbearing way, just chock full of aromas. I'm finding dunnage funk, toasted hazelnuts, freshly turned earth, green apple skin, fresh melon slices, and a punnet of red berries. And I get the backbone of bourbon sweetness here, reminiscent of lemon drizzle cake, brown sugar, Hessian cloth, and fizzy cola bottles, and more toffee and caramel. It's a musty and funky nose in a good way. And the alcohol is in very good balance too, 57.2%. I'm going to try the mouth on this. The smoky, earthy note continues, and a nuttiness is introduced in the notes of pistachios and caramelized brown sugar, prunes, and custard. And you get salted caramel, brown sugar, maple syrup, dark chocolate, cinnamon with lots of dry earth and twigs, showing off the underlying peat smoke of the dram. And the mouthfeel is very good, lots of texture, coating all sides of the mouth as you swirl it around. It's very creamy and full bodied with a well integrated alcohol, and it stimulates the flow of saliva properly. Vanilla, oranges, mango, caramel, cane sugar, cardboard, salt water, canned mandarins, and a hint of passion fruit. And then the rubber bands, the ginger, sweet licorice, lime, oak spice. And going back, I'm getting some grapefruit, cola, nutmeg, and a pink peppercorn spice. It's a touch spicier than the nose led me to believe, but it's still got enough flavour to balance it. On the finish, a sea salt note emerges, along with notes of red apple skin, fairly long, uh, black currant, and light peat smoke lingering. Vanilla, candied orange peel, caramel, cardboard, lemon balm, diesel, oak spice, and a nice tropical fruit notes in my mouth. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. I added 5 actually. And again, a nice Scotch mist there. And the water brings out a meatier, sherry profile, cured venison, black pepper, cassia bark, and more of that Dunwich warehouse must with a creamy vanilla custard sitting in the background. It still has a good balance and lots of upfront aroma. Notes of marzipan, smoked meats, and the smokiness again is akin to burnt matches. Try them all. It's got a little creme brulee, lemon zest, shortbread fingers. It's citrus forward now, with some malty breadiness showing. The smoky, earthy note continues on the palate, and nuttiness is introduced in the notes of pistachios. Notes of caramelized brown sugar, prunes, and custard round off the mouth. And on the finish, the spice feels a little more pronounced. It's sweet, creamy, earthy, and a little salty as it lingers in your mouth. A sea salt note emerges in the finish, along with notes of red apple skin. This year's 12-year-old cask strength continues the trend of being a cracking dram. It's got bags of flavour, it's well balanced, and it shows off the quality Springbank spirit and cask maturation process. So we'll cleanse our palates. So next we have the Springbank 25-year-old at 46%. This one was a combination of 35% bourbon casks and 65% sherry casks. I've yet to find out any details on how many bottles were released of this one. So it's a little darker, 25 years old, 65% sherry casks. Lovely tears on this one. Try the nose. And you get the sort of intense cherry menthol sweets. Rich blood orange, milk chocolate, stewed fruits, and apple crumble. Lots of maraschino cherries and syrup, along with a strong crisp and apple aroma. Crisp red apple. It's a real sherbety sweetness coming through. Slightly spritzy, fresh pear, lemon zest, and flamed orange peel too. It's a bold nose. Not in an overpowering sense. But it has incredibly strong aromas, balanced well with the alcohol. And going back in, I'm finding some creamy porridge. These sort of milk bottle sweeties, flan, and a slightly herbal undertone, which kind of reminds me of an autumn walk in the forest. The peat is barely noticeable, but there's a slight wet pebble minerality as I go in and out of the dram. I'll try them out. There's lots of musty, earthy, and oily notes. Subtle peat smoke in the background, demerara sugar, strawberry confectionery, licorice, and walnuts. And it's got rich flavours of caramel, coffee, and chocolate, which bring the sherry cask into the mix. And it's quite a jump from what I experienced on the nose. And I'm getting a reasonable amount of smoke, saltiness, and slight brininess. And I do get fresh orchard fruits that I saw on the nose. But they quickly morph into brown sugar and nutmeg as the palate develops. It's a nice texture to the mouthfeel. It's creamy and oily. And time and air bring out strawberry laces and Haribo cola bottles. And the finish, I'm getting creme brulee and melon. And it's a decent length finish. It's a well balanced dram with a slightly herbaceous note of tarragon and savoury deli meats. I don't know about water with this one. I'm going to add 3 drops. And a huge Scotch mist with this one. And with water, it maintains most of the previous aromas with a little bit more warehouse must and antique furniture coming through. And the orchard fruits take on more of a stewed preparation as opposed to the crisp, fresh fruit uh, that I experienced before. Still creamy and still sweet and still has a great balance. Try the mouth. A bit of acidity appearing before towards the beginning of the dram that I didn't experience before. A mixture of lemon and lime. That quickly moves into dark chocolate and burnt coffee. The peat smoke has disappeared further into the background, leaving a damp earthiness in its stead. Mouthfeel is still oily, but it's lost some of that milky creaminess from before. I don't think the dram needs water, but adding a drop isn't harmful either. Massive tears in it now. On the finish, I get more mustiness It shortens the finish slightly, but it's still well balanced. The herbal note is softened somewhat, becomes a little sweeter. Still quite savoury as well, though. And there's not much to say here. It's a delicious dram, well balanced, lots of complex flavours and aromas. I really enjoyed it. The nose and the palate do differ slightly. It's much fresher on the nose, where the palate is richer and smokier. But there's nothing wrong with that. So we'll cleanse our palate. So we're staying in Campbelltown, and we're staying with Giant and A. Mitchell, but we're going to Kilkerran, the Glengyle distillery, and we're going to have first of all the Kilkerran 8-year-old cask strength batch number 10 sherry cask at 57.4%. So this one was matured in 100% Oloroso sherry casks and bottled at 57.4%. It does look like, unlike last year, there's only going to be one release of the 8-year-old this year. But on the bright side, it does appear that it's somewhat easier to get than some of the previous releases. And it's quite dark for an 8-year-old, 100% Oloroso sherry. So it's taken on some of the sherry gas. Lovely, fantastic tears on this one. I'll try the nose. So Kilkerran's peated 8 parts per million. And there are notes of soft peat smoke, leather-bound books, and sticky toffee pudding. And there's a sort of oily, fishy, oily scent, and a full body sweet nose, mixed with a sort of greasy smoke, leathery, and it's fruity too. Rum-soaked raisins, and then some more maritime notes enter. And there's sort of coal gases and a touch of lime. And they do get the sherry tones and the nuttiness, the caramelized nuts. And it's 57.4%, but it has good alcohol integration, along with some pleasant sweetness and light peat smoke in the background. And it's a touch syrupy. There's notes of cherry cola, toffee, ash, cooked porridge, and a sort of wet earth stand out initially. And then you get freshly picked strawberries, burnt brown sugar, Cadbury fudge fingers, and a hint of that Campbelltown funk, which I can't say I've picked up a lot on the previous drams. We'll try them out. It has an incredible depth and a beautiful mouthfeel. It's a rather high ABV, but very drinkable mead. And you get a sort of mix of floral fruitiness uh, with toffee taste, a sort of thick date syrup, black currants, cherries, red currants, and a sort of maritime coastal note. And you do get the funkiness, but it's hidden by cucumber, goulash, and elderflower. And it's a fact that it's goulash, like a meaty, full taste. Caramel and tobacco, sour cherries, raspberries, cracked black pepper, and complemented by a pleasant background of dirt and cigar ash. It's not overly spicy, but there's a noticeable and pleasant warmth from the alcohol. The mouthful is very good. It's very good. It's a touch drier on the mouth than I expected given the nose. And its finish is a decent length. And the red fruits linger along with that little ashiness. Meaty, fishy. Well, actually, the meaty, fishy taste disappears in the finish. And red apples enter with some sourness. Honey, and there's that sherry wood again. Some chocolate with a nutty entry. Uh, and there's echoes of lavender. There's smoke there, but it's very faint and almost hidden. And as the whiskey develops, there's notes of an ashy, medicinal smoke way in the background, and ginger and chocolate oranges. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. It's fantastic Scotch mist on this one. Now it's like black treacle, and it intensifies the Campbelltown funk. And you do get a medicinal note, like in the background, a sort of aroma of a Lafroig. But it's not as strong. It's not TCP quite. It's diluted TCP. And it does transition from the sweetness to a more savoury note. Cashew nuts and almonds. And the mouth is good with a touch of water too. It adds a sort of fruitiness and sweetness. It mirrors the nose slightly. The reduced palate has less sweetness, slightly more bitter, and that tobacco note appearing, also leaning towards the more savoury. And it's also a touch spicier. And on the finish, the spice is now outlasting the other notes that I felt. Uh, it's a medium length. The mouthfeel is still good. I think I'd skip water in this one personally. I think I expected this to be good, and I can confirm that it delivers as expected. probably falls a little short of some of the absolute cracking Kilkerran 8-year-olds that we've seen over the last few years. So we'll cleanse our palate. So this is the Kilkerran heavily peated batch 10 at 57.8%. It's matured in 90% bourbon and 10% sherry cask, and bottled at a very bold and big 57.8%. The heavily peated Kilkerran is peated to 45 parts per million. So it's quite pale in colour. This is a non-age statement, so we don't know what age we're looking at. It's got quite thin tears, this one. And the initial impression is of a perfectly harmonious marriage between peated malt and cask influence, with the relative proportions of 90% bourbon, 10% sherry, roughly reflected in the overall nose. And it's got a sweet introduction, and picking the nose apart, there's a leafy green note of kelp, plenty of creamy vanilla from the bourbon casks. And there's some subtle dried fruit notes of sultanas, which speak for the minority sherry cask component, but they are there. And then you get the sort of a melange of coriander and Asian five spice, but always well balanced by the peaty smokiness. From the bourbon barrels, rich oak from the bourbon barrels. There's notes of icing sugar, creme brulee, and custard. And it's a sweet smoke. Salted butter, forest flower, sugar syrup, red forest berries, lemon peel, young walnuts, cooked apples. And you get notes of lemon, yogurt, and damp cloth. But also sweet peat, honey, and tin peaches. Plenty of vanilla and whiffs of cheesecake, followed by touches of olive oil and sea spray. Or try the mouth. And it starts with a tangy, slightly tart bite that announces its entry with a flourish. It then transitions gracefully into a sweeter, creamier note, which is paired with a meaty, malty character. But then it almost turns back on itself. You get an intense, almost astringent maritime note. And it's quite challenging in the middle of the mouth. The oak notes are very tannic, uh, and they almost desiccate the tongue, with only wisps of citric fruit poking through at intervals. The peat smoke is soft and sweet, with notes of toasted marshmallows, typical of the Kilkerran heavily peated range. And then hints of gooseberries and Parma violets develop over time. It's delicate, sweet, vanilla, walnuts, cake icing. There's a lot of smoke. Peat, young oak, birch juice, blackcurrant, marshmallow. There's notes of cardboard. It's somewhat drying and ashy. A big hint of wood smoke and some cracked black peppercorns. There's soft oak and a slightly bitter edge, a touch of licorice root and smoked barley husks. And then all in the background, a whisper of charred lemon peel. And the sweetness lingers in the finish, in the notes of orange pulp. It's long, smoky, very sweet, with a mild aftertaste of oak notes and orange peel. There's more wood smoke and lemon. It's got a nice salinity. And the peat finds its in most self-assured expressiveness as a smoky heat that expands to coat the tongue and the throat. The wood is present again on the finish with a somewhat abrasive texture, and that pairs with an awkward maltiness, which speaks to the relative youth of this whiskey. There's a momentary reprieve as the creamy vanilla notes emerge for a final curtain call. But then this reverts to its harshest aspects in a jarring crescendo. The fading flavours of peat smoke and hefty malt take turns in between pulses of radiant heat that nearly numb the mouth. I'm going to put 4 drops of water in this. I think I'd put 5 in actually. It is at 57.8%. And yeah, there's a nice Scotch mist to this. And with water, it softens and expands. Smoke fruits, and perhaps even an edge of soy sauce. We'll try the mouth. And with water, the ABV dies away. And that makes room for notes of straw and farmyard, peach jam, warm berry compote, and a welcome dry spiciness. Water really does bring out the fruitiness in this dram. And that satisfying smack of smokiness, which still frames everything. And with water, the finish becomes a little herbaceous. And there's maybe a little bit of fennel in there too, along with the citrus. It's got a lovely complexity and it takes water well. The Kilkerran Heavily Peated Batch 10 2024 is a fairly unapologetic whiskey. But it's not just a peat mold. It has some personality, which makes it a very promising release. And it is in itself already a very enjoyable whiskey. So we'll cleanse our palates. So our final dram of this tasting is the Longrow Red 7-year-old fresh Pinot Noir cask matured at 57.1%. So the latest Longrow Red was matured for 7 years in total, with the first 4 of those being spent in bourbon casks before being additionally matured for 3 years in French Pinot Noir casks. It was released in June 2024 and only 10,000 bottles have been made available. And you can see it's got that slightly rose, like a pale rosy wine. And it does have nice tears in it. It does have that sort of rouge, pinkish tinge. I do like Pinot Noir wine, red wine. And you get a herbal, vegetal note, and notes of tomato plant and heather. Longrow is peated at 50 to 55 parts per million and distilled in the Springbank distillery rather than the Glengyle distillery. And you get some heather and touches of morello cherries and smoky bacon. It's got a sour character with pickling spice, and it moves into cured meats, salami, coal fires, and sort of musty wardrobes. It's a little restrained on the nose. There's a musty peat smoke, but I'm having to dig deep for the rest of the aromas. There's some treacle grass, damp cardboard, and musty cupboards. And sweet and savoury meat on the palate, with notes of smoked ham, wine gums, raspberry jam, and honey. It's got a decent texture, and there's a lot of upfront earth charred oak, bitter orange pith, black pepper spice, and sour plums. It's quite fiery. There's some milk chocolate, grape must, bonfire smoke, and some light red fruits towards the latter end of the palate. And characteristic coastal notes come to the forefront in the finish of this dram. There's a pronounced ginger ale flavour left in the mid-length finish. I'm going to try 4 drops of water in this. And there's some lovely Scotch mist in this. And I'm getting more of the wine cask coming through. There's a mixture of red fruits and wood and tannin. There's something quite meaty in the background, and there's still some sour notes, but overall, not much has changed with the addition of water. We'll try the mouth. And it maintains the mouthfeel, slightly less spice and bitterness, more coffee and chocolate, and more air too. The smoke is fairly restrained on the initial palate, but shows up later. And on the finish, I'm still getting the ginger ale warming my chest as the finish goes on. So I've had some good and less good Longrow reds. I think this one's a bit in the middle for me. It's a little one-dimensional with some astringent notes in places that I didn't particularly like. Saying that, there's some nice cask influence. I do like Pinot Noir wine and a good underlying spirit. I probably wouldn't order another dram of this. However, I wouldn't turn my nose up at one if I was given it. So, this year's 3 Springbanks, the 13-year-old local barley, the Springbank 12-year-old Cask strength, and the Springbank 25-year-old were all cracking drams. The Kilkerrans are both worth trying, and the Longrow red, I think, is okay, but not really top shelf. Thanks for listening.